This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruitment podcast. And I have to say, I'm containing a real squeal of excitement as I finally introduce to you our global community, somebody who I think I've been poking to come on since we started this podcast way back in 2020. But finally, our diaries aligned and the stars aligned and the universe has allowed this to happen. And you are going to, if you don't already know this person, I don't know where you're hiding because she's been extremely viral on LinkedIn. That sounds wrong. But she's it does, you know what I mean? But let me introduce you today, Kat Reid, who is the founder of Truly Reliable HR, ethical recruitment hacker, HR specialist, and fellow Vimto lover. And I'm meant to be showing you my Vimto here. For anyone that's not from the northwest of England, you need to Google Vimto, Vimto, although we all pronounce it Vimto.
Hello.
Vimto. Welcome to you today, Kat. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Leisha. Thank you so much for having me. I am genuinely stoked that this is happening. I'm so excited, and yeah, I'm really, really thrilled to be here. So
we're both actually, because we're both such high energy people, I think we're actually going to have to try and calm ourselves the fuck down, Cats.
Yeah, I think that might, but let's see how this goes. I can see a lot of laughing gonna happen.
Definitely. For those who are not yet familiar, because we do have a global audience who might not all live on LinkedIn all the time, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then how your journey has led you to become this HR specialist.
Yeah. So I'm Kat, and I own an HR consultancy for small businesses here in the UK. I work with businesses who don't need a full-time HR person, but who need someone who's actually going to give them hands-on support and going to help them do things rather than just sit and prattle off the ACAS code of best practice, which is a very, very useful thing to be aware of, but it's not actually demonstrably helpful when you're doing things and when you're in certain situations and you're navigating through the complexities of employment law. I started my career, like most people who end up in the people space, I started my career in recruitment when I left university, went and worked in oil and gas recruitment, moved down to England in 2015. Continued on in recruitment for a while, and then kind of fell into HR. So after deliberately choosing recruitment, I fell into HR, which is
I love that. It's the roundabout way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like everyone's like, oh, I fell into recruitment. And I fell into HR, mate. And it's because I realized that people didn't understand what HR was actually about. Because it's not about being like an absolute fun sponge or a killjoy. It's about being absolutely fair. And fairness is something that really, really matters to me, and it kind of translates into everything that I do, including, like you said, my ethical recruitment hacking, which is where I go under the hood of what a company is doing and go, hey, you know what? Here's why these things are fucking broken. Because they're broken a lot.
They're broken. You know, I'm going to show my age here because I actually did my qualification. I didn't actually do a degree. I did an HND, which was like a professional qualification. It was called
like as someone who worked with the tradies, HNDs.
They're just they're very vocational actually, and it was called personnel management. And I actually which became HR, became known as human resources, of course. And it's all around that word, the centered word, which is human.
Yeah.
The human journey. And I think that's why it's, for me, apart from the fact that I just adore you and I love everything that you talk about, because your LinkedIn, let's talk about your LinkedIn. Because your voice is so you, only because I know you. But for those who maybe just have been following you because you clearly very prolific on there and you use the algorithm very well, let's be honest, like I do. What do you think is broken between the link, given that recruitment is about the humans and the people, and that HR is about the humans and the people? Why and how badly do recruiters get HR? Like, why there seems to be this disconnect?
If I'm being polite about it, it's because recruiters are there to do the operational function of getting people jobs, right? Okay. And they get tunnel visioned into that. The other side of that is that sometimes they're just a little bit fucking lazy, and they don't actually want to always do the right thing, because actually figuring out the right thing for your business to operate within the constraints of the law whilst also balancing what you want your HR management strategy to look like, it's something that's quite difficult. So unless you've got somebody who you're paying to do it and you really want to invest in it because you really give a shit about it, or you've got someone like me who drops in and supports you and gives you the support that you need on an ad hoc basis, you're not going to actually invest the time in doing it. There's also an element of kind of being a bit chancery. Like we've all heard the horror stories out there. There are some people out there who just don't give a shit
Yeah.
about, and rely on people not knowing the law, and not knowing what their rights are in certain situations to get away with some really, really piss poor behavior that is unfair and unethical. And sometimes that can happen because there's somebody who sits at the top of a recruitment firm who just has his little Jordan Belfort fantasy going on in his head. I'm saying his, sometimes it's hers.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but they've got that little Wolf of Wall Street thing going on where it's like, oh, I can do this and that and the other. I'm a baller because I've got this and I've made this business out of nothing. It's like, no, you've made your business off the backs and the effort of your people. And you've got this disconnect now in terms of doing the right thing. And that's not just from a sense of, you know, making sure that when you have to fire somebody, you do it correctly, which is like, I'm not going to lie, the bar is so low we can fucking trip over it. And yet somehow it still goes wrong. It all comes down to things like understanding compensation benefits, understanding what a competitive offer looks like, what does good training and development look like for your recruiters, what are the right career paths you can offer, understanding what that is, and then being able to communicate that to potential people who want to come and work with you, particularly now in the recruitment market where, you know, I think I saw Matthew Baxter a couple of days ago posting something on LinkedIn that like made me almost snort tea through my nose, where it was talking about the difference in hiring criteria for recruiters. Now in 2023, you've got these people who are now going to ask you to have like regular billing, all this desk stuff that you can just pour over with somehow ignoring restrictive covenants. But you've got this change in demand now, and it's cyclical, isn't it? It goes from a market to an employee's market.
It does.
An employer's market. And people have still forgotten that even in an employer's market, you kind of have to attract people, correct?
It's meant to be a dialogue, isn't it? There's so many points I want to pick up on there. And I think just to set the scene, I think observationally, I mean, I've been in the recruitment industry now for a quarter of a century, which is absolutely ludicrous. It's just insane that I've been at that, and that I did fall into it, by the way. Yeah. I think that there are a lot of people, and if you are one of them, this is not a shaming comment I'm about to make. You are an accidental recruitment leader. You are very good at your job. You are very knowledgeable in your industry. You have built, whether it's a boutique or a sizable independent business, and by accident, you have grown your business, but you are not an HR specialist. You possibly have brought people along the journey that actually also don't really care about the sort of pastoral side of the human journey of what it means to be an employer and the legal aspect of it. And I think that's where there is a real disconnect as employers ourselves, but also not forgetting that we're the conduit to the industry and the people that we're then partnering as clients. So I think it's so multi-cyclical, isn't it?
It really is.
It's understanding that. And like you say, you're going to always have two kinds of people, those that really don't give a shit. And actually, if they get a churn and if people don't like it, and what's your maternity policy? What's your flexible working policy? Well, we don't have one, so fuck off. We don't care. Yeah. Then actually, this podcast isn't for you, and you're probably not even listening. So I can say what I like about you.
Yeah, exactly. Or you get the people on the other side who, if I'm going to, again, playing devil's advocate, because you do have to sometimes, there's people who have all the right intentions without the right tools and knowledge, and who aren't certain of how to get the right tools and knowledge. So they do a quick Google search, they find something like ELAS or something like that, who are going to be like their on the phone advisors who will literally just send you the shite that you download off the ACAS website and you pay them a monthly subscription fee for it. Why the hell are you doing that? You then have to do everything yourself, and all the emotional crap that goes alongside it. Like, I mean, you've managed people for years. You and I both know it's emotionally draining when you're managing an.
Of course it is. It is. No, I totally agree with you. And I think, this episode is going to resonate with so many people on so many different sides of the desk. And I'm not asking you to impart all of your expertise into, what is effectively a short episode, but we are setting the scene here as to, and I do want to kind of go back to something that you alluded to, not least because it's in your title on LinkedIn. When you talk about ethical recruitment hacking, what do you mean? Because I know what I mean by ethical. Yeah. What do you mean by ethical?
So what I mean is that I'm not going to say anything that's untrue when I'm going into something. And I am going to go in with the same approach that I do to everything and be absolutely fair. I'm also not going to sit there and shit talk a recruiter, because having been in recruitment on every side of the desk you can imagine, within the dynamic, which I'm really lucky that my career has given me that level of perspective. Yeah. But I know where the recruiter sits in all of these places, and somehow they have limited like responsibility and autonomy and power, but all of this accountability for when shit goes wrong. And actually, 99% of the time, you need to lift under the hood and go, this is systemic of a company who does not actively want to invest in this because they've got something that works well enough. And well enough and mediocre is fine. And I'm personally of the opinion in my personal life and my professional life that why be mediocre when you can actually be decent and really good?
Totally agree. So you're talking about processes, is that what you mean?
So to a degree it's process, it's the whole thing.
Okay.
When I go in and I do an audit, and I've recently done an audit for a large insurance company that they actually paid me to do, which is very exciting because they wanted to really invest and get under the covers and under the scenes. We looked at everything from how does the application process work? Is it easy? What are the things that are putting them off? And I gave them some feedback on some of their diversity monitoring questionings. I'm like, hey, do you know how this is positioned? This is a bit shitty. And why are you doing this? How are you using this information? Like, where does this go? What is your reporting looking like? Why are you not disclosing that? Where is this as part of the journey? That sort of stuff. Right through to what was the recruiter talking to me like? How useful were they in the process? Were they pleasant, responsive? Did I get everything that I needed? Like what was striking the right tones and what wasn't striking the right tones? How was the advert written? Because you see it in different companies. You get kind of three scenarios. You get a company who just puts up their job description and goes, here's my shopping list, off we go, and you're like, that's not a fucking advert. And like, much shout out to Mitch Sullivan.
I was just about to say Mitch's name. You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, like Mitch has got his finger right on the pulse there about the fact that
he always has. He has. He came on our show about, it was probably about 2 years ago. He came in season 2,
remember that episode,
and it was one of our most downloaded episodes. The thing is about Mitch, I know there's the controversial side of Mitch, but actually what he says is actually right about how we communicate. But I
love this whole the controversial side of things around Mitch. The controversy is only there because it's like, it might be a little bit on the bone, but sometimes humor, especially dark humor, makes a point very, very effectively. And if something a little bit uncomfortable, it's because it's close to the truth.
Yeah, of course, I love that sort of sense of humor, definitely. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt your flow.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. So you've got those people who just post the job description, or you've got the people who've let a marketing team look at it, who've SEO optimized it, aka slammed a load of keywords into it and made it something that a human can't read, but it'll come up on a Google search. Or you've got someone who actually understands how to advertise the job and how to position that. Option number 3 is fucking rare, and advertising statistics can show that. And everyone's like, "Oh, recruitment advertising's dead." I'm like, but you write a really good advert, and it's not just an advert that you put somewhere where you might actually get a response. If you know how to advertise, you might get. It also then gives you headhunting collateral. Send your stuff. If you've got a team of recruiters who are making outreach approaches, and don't get me started on like poor outreach approaches, like
the in-mail spam.
Not even the in-mail spam, it's the in-mail spam where it's actually all about the recruiter and not about the candidate. It's like, kids, do you know, if you just said, hey, I've got this opportunity, I think from looking at your profile that you might be a match for it. I've attached some details. Can we have a call so I can answer your questions? Thanks. That's enough.
That's just copy and paste what Kat just said.
Yeah, like, or like, DM me and I'll type up. You don't even have to like sit and listen and try and interpret the Scottish accent or anything like that. But honestly, the more simple it is, the better. And giving them a wee PDF attachment to something sexy that then sells that, like, what a fucking difference. But people don't.
Or before they go for an interview as a part of the prep, it's a collateral there. And we want anyone that's listening, you're aiming to be number 3, right? You definitely don't want to be number 2 where either a marketer or a chatbot is doing it for you. Takes out the human factor. And then number 1, seriously, we've all had clients that have just said, I want X, Y, and Z, and it's like, that's not consulting. I mean, that's a whole different thing in its own entity as well.
Right. And then the other thing that I do with an ethical recruitment hacking is, unless I'm invited to by a recruitment agency and they want me to audit it to give them suggestions for where their L&D for their consultants needs to go, I will not touch a recruitment agency. And that's because you guys are a third party who have got a step further removed. So unless you are fortunate enough to be really partnered with your organization, whereby you've got someone who sits on the other side of the desk who's minded like I am, who sits and goes, right, when you're working with me as a supplier, here's how this is going to work. I will give you this feedback within this amount of days. I will chase that for you. I'll be proactive with you. I will hold my hands up if I fuck up on that one. And you will get the feedback, warts and all. Like,
I mean, look, going in very deep into sort of the ethical aspect of what you've said on a real sort of fundamental basis, it's doing what you say you're going to do.
Right.
And that's what integrity means, right? And I think that any business that isn't considering how diversity and inclusion, you can basically now see companies that are just buying the badges. They're buying the mental health badges. They're buying the disability friendly badges. They're buying the neurodiverse badges. The rainbow washing for LGBTQ plus. It's
during Pride season now.
I just think it can be, there are so many companies where I get shocked when I get a call from a recruiter, because obviously that is my day job. I'm the other side to you. They haven't had a good HR policy. They haven't had, it's not intrinsic, and I'm like, from the outside looking in, you're as a company, you're doing this, and they say it's all nonsense. And the company leaders, it's all bullshit.
Expensive marketing, really expensive marketing, a couple of tailored photos. I always say this, and here's a bit of a pro tip for any of your candidates who might be listening here going into things. If you're not being represented by Leisha and you're looking at other options, because Leisha doesn't work with arseholes, that's rule number one. But if you're looking at other places, which is your right to do that, and you're right to keep your options open and find the right place for you, go and check on their website and see what that actually looks like. Because I remember a consultancy who spoke to me about the work that I was doing at SRG and what I'd done with SRG and how the hires had done. And I did a lot within that business. And I think over the time I was there, it was over £250,000 saved in hiring for them, just by kind of changing their approach. And they're like, how did you do it? And I went, well, the first thing that I did when I looked at their website is I was like, why is it all white men here? Like, where like, this is not what we do. This is not what we do. This is not who we are. Like, SRG was a predominantly female business, and it was scientists who recruited other scientists, and that was their USP. Why are we not leading with this? How are we representing that? How are we then showing people that we've got people who'd been in the business for like 10 plus years, who'd had great career journeys? When was the last time we overhauled all of this? And the answer is they hadn't. So we started doing that, then it changed the narrative and the approach and stuff like that. But I spoke to a consultancy who have done a lot of work to kind of improve themselves, and I'm not going to name them, but
no, that's fine.
And they were like, what's going on here? And I'm like, well, on the market, we hear about your employee awards and we hear about the fact that you do an office reader of the year. I wouldn't feel safe of being a woman working in your environment. I also don't see myself represented in your photographs. I see the people that you work with, and like, all I see are young, beautiful people who like a drink.
Is
that all you got? Because that's all you'll attract.
No, exactly. You're just gonna, it is the law of attraction. And I think that on a really fundamental basis, what you're saying there is do your due diligence. Go and have a look at the employees on LinkedIn. What are their diverse backgrounds? Where have they come from? Because if it's everybody's come from the red brick and they're all of a certain age and they all look a certain way and they're all stood there in the certain photos, that is not a diversity, and then they've got the badge. So I think it's unpicking it. And I always recommend any candidate, whether it is through me or not, you've got the collateral to be able to do that level of due diligence yourself. Now, I'm not saying Glassdoor, because I'm still very cynical about Glassdoor, because I think it's very TripAdvisory and
Glassdoor should always be taken with a pinch of salt. Like a big pinch of salt.
Massive pinch of salt.
Yeah, I always say if you're looking at Glassdoor, look at how a company responds to Glassdoor.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I always love about restaurant reviews, like how the chef replies. It's like funny, but anyway, that we're digressing far too far. This is great, because I think what I want this episode to be is to empower people who maybe haven't got the budget to bring somebody like yourself in, or maybe they're working in a business where they're like, actually, I want to run my own desk as if it's my own business. So what advice would you give? What are the 3 most important things we can each do as individuals to make ourselves more ethical in how we're thinking about from an HR mindset?
Okay. So in terms of if you're setting up your own business and you want to run HR and run it right, the first thing that you've got to do is check your fucking ego at the door and embrace the fact that you are going to fuck up.
Okay, like it.
Once you've embraced that, And once you're okay with that and you can sit in that and go, I'm going to fuck this up at some point and I'm going to end up putting myself in bother, and I'm not going to be so arrogant as to claim that I'm not going to do it, then you're going to find that you're much more open to feedback and to things where if you're not doing things right, you can course correct quite quickly. The second thing that I would say is, if you're genuinely serious about not getting somebody in to support you, and there are people out there who aren't just me, there's a lot of really good HR professionals out there, and we don't actually charge a ridiculous amount of money a lot of the time. In fact, I actually had a client approach me to work with them, and they were asking for a retainer initially, and I went, you don't need a retainer, there's not enough of you. I will charge you the same rate to work on an ad hoc basis, but let's only pay for what you need. So people will do that out there. It does happen. So find the right person who resonates with you and work with somebody. If you're bootstrapping, whatever, there are things that you should bootstrap and there are things you shouldn't bootstrap. And I always say that people and pounds are the things you shouldn't bootstrap. So always have a good HR person and a good accountant.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
And then the last thing is, be very clear on what the vision that you have for your workplace is. How do you actually want to run a business? Okay, because there is no right or wrong answer out there. And although I might jokingly rip the agencies that are slightly more old school, actually they've got their fucking place in the world. And there are people who flourish in that environment and who perform really well in that environment. And if that's how you want to run things, make sure everything is aligned, because you can still run that environment and do it ethically. Correctly. Whereas if you know you want to have a more, I'm loath to say modern, I'd probably call it a more liberal workplace.
Okay, like that word, yeah.
Yeah, because it's not modern, because that indicates that something else is antiquated. It's not, right? Like, if you want to have a more liberal workplace style where you're going to attract people who are going to march to the beat of their own drum and do things differently, you still have to have rules for how that place is going to work. And you have to have a strong and clear vision of what you think is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And then be ready to document that, because I harp on and bang on about policy and process all the time. And people go, ugh. And I'm like, right, let's look at it this way. Pretend it's a board game.
Okay.
If you try to play Monopoly with no rules, it goes a bit fucking sideways.
It goes feral.
I mean, Monopoly is always a bit feral, even with some rules.
There's been plenty of murders, haven't there, in a Monopoly, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Never trust the banker. Rule for life. Joke. That's a joke.
It's okay.
But, genuinely, when you've got a board game, you need to have rules to understand what the board game is, and then everyone has fun because they know that they're playing by the rules and everyone's on the same page.
I think to summarize what you've just said there, that was managing expectations, isn't it? It's actually that simple. And I just think, generally speaking in life, as I say an older person, because there's going to be people listening who are older than me, but I've been in recruitment a long time to say this. I think for me, that's where everything can be solved in any relationship, whether it's with your colleague, whether it's with your girlfriend, boyfriend, partner, daughter, mother. It is managing expectations from the start.
Communicating effectively.
And communicating
multiple forms of communication of that, right? Like, it's why I always say to people, unless it's in writing, it's not real.
I think that there's a lot of that, actually, Kat, that gets missed in recruitment. And I think that might be down to the fact that we're all really busy. We are a fast-paced sector. Sometimes there's a little bit of, we put trust in another person. But if it's not in writing, it's not going to happen. It's like changing somebody's commission structure, promising them promotion prospects. That's actually one of the key things why people often leave who are doing well, where it's like they keep moving the goalposts on my promotion.
I heard a horror story. I've actually got two horror stories from two excellent recruiter friends of mine, both of whom had been promised significant pay rises with where they were, got strung along for about a year, and then got the most pathetic little pay rises going through. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do now? And the reason why I believe that their businesses have elected to do that is they've looked at the economic climate and gone, we can get away with this. And I'm like, that's a bit of a dick move, guys.
Isn't it? It is. Now, with everything that's going on, good employers should be increasing your standard of living. Cost of living crisis has impacted everybody.
And there's so many ways, because not every business, and I have this conversation a lot with people who get really emotionally stressed out because they want to give more money, but they know they can't afford it because as a business, their costs have gone up as well. So they go, oh my God, what can I do? And I'm like, okay, let's get smart here. Let's figure out what people actually want and look at delivering it. Because sometimes it's not just compensation. What if somebody who's really, really invested in their learning and development?
Yes.
And they don't have enough time to do that. So what if you then said, okay, for the next 2 months, provided you can hit your targets, but you're going to get a half day on either a Monday or a Friday, because to be fair, let's be honest, Friday is generally the best, but nothing fucking happens on a Friday.
No.
Like, so give them a half day on a Friday, make it a policy. They get to do this and they get to work through their things, and you're going to support them and you're going to support their qualification cost, because that's a completely different taxable thing for your business that you can recoup something from, and then you're more likely to retain the individual and you make them a better worker. What a win all around.
It's a win-win situation. I mean, look, that is a whole different podcast, and we definitely don't have time today to talk about how learning and development generally is underpins everything about retention of staff, not just hiring, but retention of good staff. That we're always, if you're listening to a podcast, I'm going to make an assumption that you like to develop yourself, even if it is self-learning, that's still learning. And I think to be in an environment that doesn't encourage that and doesn't actually see the value in investing in that, they actually don't give a shit about you. That's, to me, if you don't have that policy, and that is embraced by a good, strong HR policy, but underpinned by learning and development. And it can be an absolute revelation to people when you have the conversation you've just described there, because it's like, actually, that time is something that you never thought would be possible, but you're giving them half a day. But look at the skills you're going to get, look at the benefit everybody's going to get from that learning and development they're going to go through.
It's magical. Or other things like, you know, what if we did a 9-day fortnight policy? Because everyone starts talking about 4-day working weeks. 4-day working weeks are great if they work for your business. They do not always work for your business. A 9-day fortnight can be a really lovely little solution to put in instead, whereby you still get the hours out of the person. And if you do it smart, then you've got 25% on a Monday and 25% on a Friday who are off every week. But that means you've got 75% of the wheels turning. Means that people are going to communicate better and leave better handovers and update their CRMs, because that way things can happen.
Well, this is it, absolutely. And you know, who knows where the future lies, with whether it's the 4-day working week, the 9-day fortnight, but just generally speaking, flexible work. You know, just creating a culture where it works for your customers, your internal customers above all else, for the future of for your business to thrive in the future. Well, I mean, God, you know, if people haven't seen the value in why you are this expert and just your personality absolutely using through it, and you're totally sponsored by Vimto, so if Vimto want to get in touch,
they really should.
I'll take
a couple of litres of sugar free every month.
Do you do the sugar? Yeah, no, I do as well, especially when it's on offer.
I do the sugar free. I'm like, now that I'm in my 30s and I had a couple of health scares over the last couple of years, and now I've kind of come out the end of it. I'm going, well, that was a freebie.
Yes.
Much better care of myself overall.
Good.
And cutting down on the old sugar was one of them.
Well, you do. I mean, for anyone that is watching over on YouTube, you can see how vibrant and amazing Kat looks. You look absolutely wonderful. You really do. So you're a good advert. And I've been sugar-free since January 2023 myself. So accidental.
I have always said, I'm like, God, when I grow up, I'd like to be like Leisha.
Well, I mean, I'm not grown up yet, obviously. So, you know,
which I think is part of this. I think it's part of the secret, right? Cling on to joy. Cling on to
somebody called me Benjamin Button the other day, and I had to go and see what that meant. And I was like, what does that mean?
See, that's a vibe. Yeah, I can say that for you.
I have to. For anyone that is wondering about sugar-free living, it was actually driven by my perimenopause. And I found that I was getting these horrendous spikes in my energy, even though I've been sober for years. Obviously, I talk about it very publicly, and I couldn't understand it, because I eat really well. I eat really good food. I don't really eat processed food, but I was noticing that when I was having, you know, a bit of a sugary treat after dinner, you know, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, I was then getting this horrendous spike at the other side. And I did a little trial where I didn't have any for a couple of weeks, and then I had a piece of like my mum's birthday cake or something, and I literally crashed. So it's amazing how you can still feel like you're rewarding yourself. There are so many different options out there. And I am now, I'm now up to 95% cocoa. Oh, it's hard. Your mouth's like that.
Yeah, you kind of pucker, don't you?
You literally, it's a bit like having a mouthful of peanut butter, be like that. But you get your chocolate hit and it's delicious, and you're still feeling like you're getting that little sweet reward, but it just, you don't get any spikes. So that's a totally different podcast. You have been remarkable, and obviously everyone's gonna, you know, be clicking through, getting your contact details, and you know, you are just one of those people that you speak the truth, you share your vulnerability, Kat, with everybody, and you're just one of the most honest people, and I could just give you a massive hug.
Oh, well, we'll do it at some point. At some point when you're in Manchester, give me a shout.
Well,
we'll go and get like we'll go a sugar-free tea or something.
Or coffee or something. Yeah, no, I'm giving them.
Yeah, I do love a coffee. That is one of my weaknesses. I do love a coffee.
Well, you know, I'm all here for the coffee. But thank you. It's been really valuable, and thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
Me.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, darling.